Kia ora, everybody, and welcome to the Aotearoa Property Data Network, hosted by Toitū Te Whenua Land Information New Zealand. Today's webinar about common operating tools for emergency management. I'm Ben Riley. I'm a sector relationship partner here at Toitū Te Whenua, looking after property data area. And today we've got Rob Deakin, who you can see on the screen, our Matanga Tatai Wahi Matamua, or Principal Geospatial Specialist in the resilience space, giving a demo firstly of our CODEM, Common Operational Data Sets for emergency management, and then we'll have Phil Woods, Geospatial Products and Analytics Manager over at FENZ, Fire and Emergency New Zealand, giving a demo about the Common Operations portal. And we'll have time for, and then time after those two demos for some Q&A and discussion to fill out the remainder of the hour. I'll just start with opening karakia, if I can get the slide to go. Here we go. Tamata tātou, whaia te mātauranga, kia marama, kia tupu, kia tiaki ngā whenua, ngā moana, ngā arawai, kia whai take ngā mahi katoa, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou, toi te kupu, toi te mana, toitū te whenua, homie, hui, tai kie. We pursue knowledge for understanding, developing and caring for the lands, the bodies of water and waterways. We seek purpose in all that we do. Let us show respect for each other, hold fast to our language, hold fast to our spiritual strength, sustain the land, gather and go forward together. And just the agenda there that I've already run through. So without much further ado, I will hand over to Rob as our first presentation today. Rob.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. As Ben said, I'm Rob Deakin, Principal Geospatial Specialist at Toitū Te Whenua. In the last few years, I've been involved in looking at our work to better support emergency management and disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. I'm going to talk through a project that we've been working on for the last couple of years, really, which is looking at the establishment of a common operational data set for emergency management, or providing those data sets. So I'm going to run through a bit of the background to the project and why we're doing it, and I'll finish off with a brief demo, and then hopefully that will set the scene for Phil talking through the work the FENZ are currently busy with as well. So I'll start off by sharing my screen, if I can find the right one to share. Hopefully you're seeing a nice flash title. Stage. So the project, and I guess LINZ is interested in this, is for a number of years. You know, LINZ has been an agency who are promoting the improvement and accessibility to geospatial data, not just LINZ's own data, but data that's available across the system to support a whole group of value adds for our country in different sectors, be it government, be it private sector, be it education, just trying to unlock the value of geospatial information for all. And obviously working in the disaster risk reduction space and emergency management space is a big area where a lot of these values can be driven from. And if we just think about the practicalities of emergency management, just being able to understand what's happening where, what's happened where, where buildings and property have been affected, what are the use of those buildings and property, how safe are they to enter. And this is just an image from the Christchurch earthquakes USAR team, and imagine being dropped into a fairly chaotic environment where you're not sure where your safe havens are, you're not sure which buildings have been inspected and have been searched. Just that reliance on timely and valuable geospatial information to let you know what's happening where is critical to both sort of immediate tactical planning and a longer term operational planning. But it's really essential to be able to build that picture for a whole number of reasons. So understanding where the danger is, who's affected, which services are available, how can we figure out how to best provide the support that's needed, and how might that picture change through time. So that understanding, that spatial awareness and the temporal awareness is pretty critical to effective emergency management, emergency response and planning of those activities. But experience has taught us, both from the Kaikoura quakes, from the Christchurch quakes, from the COVID response, from any number of recent major emergencies that have affected New Zealand, is that we continually find it hard to find the data that we want to use and analyze. A lot of the time, people involved in responses are relying on existing personal relationships to find the data they need. It's often not clear what information is authoritative, and subsequently there's a lot of time and effort duplicated around emergency response that could be better spent actually getting on and doing stuff rather than digging around for the right data and information to make those decisions. So wouldn't it be great if we could sort ourselves out and have that information much more easier to hand? And that's really what the CODEM project has been about. So in the wake of the COVID responses, a number of agencies sat around the table to collectively think about what could we do better to enable that. And you see the participants there who were involved in this discussion, and specifically thinking around geospatial data and information, there were three key areas that sort of stuck out as priorities that we thought we could get some collective action around it. One of it was just improving the availability of and the content of some critical data sets that are commonly used, and both LINZ and police at the time were involved in work to just make available that base data, and LINZ have been involved in a data improvement project for a number of 5 or 6 years now, looking specifically at meeting better needs of emergency management community, and police at the time were also looking at the emergency services data contract that they administer on behalf of some of the other emergency services. So that data area was pretty well covered. The second area was really the idea that a number of agencies want to improve their ability to establish common operating pictures. And then the third area was sort of a longer term burn around improving capability and capacity of geospatial expertise in the workforce. So looking at those three problem areas, the one around common operating pictures seemed to be timely and critical, and wasn't really being dealt with elsewhere collectively. We established a project that was going to look at this problem space, and I really just wanted to point out that this isn't a problem that's unique to New Zealand. Under the auspices of the UN, there's a working group that a few years ago we created this strategic framework on the use of geospatial information services for disaster management that talks around the need for quality geospatial information being available in a timely way to support coordinated decision making in all phases of emergency management. So we know we struggled with this in the past, and we reinvent the wheels with each event, but it's not a problem that is unique to New Zealand. And if we can crack it here, we might be able to share some of those benefits with our international partners as well. So we kicked off a project a couple of years ago with support from LINZ and National Emergency Management Agency to really kick into what the problem space looked like. We ran a startup project through the NZ GovTech Accelerator hosted by Creative HQ in Wellington, and really did a deep dive into the problem space and a lot of interviews with users from all sorts of communities at the pointy end of emergency management to lead us through this process of doing background research on the problem space to get a much deeper understanding of that, to ideate some potential solutions around that, and then to start prototyping and testing those solutions. And that's really led us to where we are a couple of years later on. So throughout the process, we've had a lot of interviews with people involved practically at the pointy end, collating all of those findings and insights have led us to looking at 5 potential solutions that we want to put in place. And really, in summary, we want to make data easy to find. We want to ensure that the data is trusted and authoritative and valid when people access it. People need to know where to go to get the data before they need it, so they're not wasting time during a critical response trying to work out what to do and where to go to find that data, that they already know where it is and how to get hold of it. We want to make that data easy to share. And from the perspective of data providers, and really want to engage with communities to promote the use of the data that is available to raise awareness of what it is and how they can get hold of it. Breaking that down into sort of a more technical, I guess, aspects of the solution design, there were sort of 5 areas that we have been focusing on. One is the design of a web-based catalogue of geospatial data sets to support emergency management, and to be able to curate within that catalogue some collections of data, and that's what I'll demonstrate at the end of this short presentation. I think the other areas that we are aware of that are part of the solution are the establishment of data sharing agreements between critical organisations before events happen, and we've done some work looking into the issues around that, particularly with the Lifelines community over the last couple of years. The need for data standardisation, so that information that's being gathered during and used in a response in Northland is the same as that in Southland, and working with the community to understand what those standards should be for data exchange and formatting data and data schemas is part of what needs to be done. And then really working with communities of practice to embed the use of these tools in their existing ways of working, and also to use those communities of practice to help us evolve the system through time, are all aspects of the solution to this problem. So just a few words on what CODEM is and CODEM isn't. So when we spoke to the users, it was very clear that individual organisations didn't want their operational systems duplicated or replaced. So we're not looking to establish common operating pictures. So you'll see those denoted at the top as COP XYZ through to N. We're not in the space of replacing or wanting to change those operational systems for organisations. But what we do want to do is to be able to gather that data from numerous sources, and make it accessible and expose it through one space, and that being a online data catalogue that's housed in a website that's designed specifically for use by the emergency management communities. And although, focus of this talk is on common operating pictures, there's obviously a whole bunch of other uses within the emergency management and disaster reduction for that system. So in planning, in understanding risk, in terms of supporting rebuild. So there's a whole bunch of other users for this collective collection of data beyond common operating pictures for use in emergency management. So just mention that as well. So what we want to do is to move from this very uncoordinated approach, both in terms of data capture and ways of working, into a framework that's much more collaborative, and CODEM can play a part in that, but it's only part of the solution that we need to work with. So I'm just going to flick very quickly into a view of what the system looks like, if I can pop up the right window. So this is a prototype that we've had a lot of support from Eagle Technologies in developing over the last phase of the project, and you'll see the type of things that we want to present to users is this certainly a search catalogue that enables rapid access through to the data sets. The idea that we can curate those data thematically into different bundles, and these are just some examples of what those bundles could be, just to make it easier for users to work on, to provide a facility for organisations to flag up their own data sets to enable them to register it with the the catalogue, to provide links and to work with existing communities of practice so that they recognise this portal as a resource that they can have part ownership in, and they can come to support the work that they do. And then, you know, stuff you might otherwise typically find on websites is to, you know, news about recently updated data sets, provide resources about how to use the system and how to use the data as sort of a value add, rather than just having a bold data catalogue that doesn't provide any sort of guidance on how or what to do with the stuff that's in there. So that's a very quick view of the type of services we want to present through the system. Obviously, looking at some of the search functionality. If we're interested in flooding, we might just want to quickly skip through to see what information is available around rivers. So again, a very quick and rapid presentation of the data, so we can click through those data sets to find out a little bit more about the content, so access to the metadata from data providers. We're not looking to rehost data, we just want to provide links through to resources that are provided by other organisations, and this is data that's published by NEMA, which is great to see. Or if we have that notion about wanting to quickly find information specifically around tsunami, so I can jump into that tsunami data bundle. I could see what data sets are available from a range of different providers that I might want to quickly jump through to. So if I wanted to find out more specifically about, say, the Wellington regional evacuation zones, I could click through to a web map view of that data, as well as accessing the metadata. And then if I was interested more specifically about information that might be specific to the Wellington location, what other data sets are available, there's the facility there just to pull up other data sets that are available for the regions related to emergency management. So we're trying to find ways to not just have a well curated bundle or catalogue of data, but to make it easy for users to navigate their way through there, which is typically a problem with a lot of data catalogues aren't particularly user friendly in that respect, and to make this really a well resourced tool and home that people will use as part of their BAU functions outside of times of emergency response, but they'll know there's a resource there that they can interact with to find and to post data well in advance of it being needed to support emergency response. So that's what we're trying to do with the system. Sort of where we are at the prototype phasing at the moment is that we've tested out all of the functionality that we need from the catalogue through the last phase of the development, and we think we've got a lot of the functionality that we need just using commercial off-the-shelf tools, particularly specifically, I guess, with the ArcGIS Online environment and the ArcHub tools. But that's not to say that the system is just tied to Esri ArcGIS users. Anybody can search and access the catalogue irrespective of what platforms they're operating on. And what we're looking to do over the next 6 months is really to firm up the content, to put some valuable, reliable data sets into that, so we can better understand the curation processes and overheads around doing that. We want to develop the processes to engage and manage, engage with suppliers and to manage the upload and use of the data. So we'll be looking to talk to data providers over the next few months to see what useful content that they've got and to understand their concerns about accessibility or privacy, and on what measures we can put in place in the system to sort of manage access in controlled ways where the data shouldn't be made openly available. We want to continue that valued engagement with users to understand how the data and particularly the system could fit in with their existing ways of working. And then when we get to the end of the 6-month process, we'll be looking at a range of options to take the project forward, depending on resources or not, as the case may be, depending on a new government, ministerial priorities, funding issues, willingness to work across the system to get this done. I guess the thing is that we know that this is a missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle. It was again illustrated through the cyclone response that there's we could be much better at coordinating access to data and knowing what data is available ahead of responses. We know collectively we can do something about this, but the struggle is, as ever, is coordinating that, getting the right governance around it, and getting the right functionality in place. So that's the sort of thing we're going to be looking at through the next phase of prototyping. If you're particularly interested in finding out more about the work, or specifically you're a data provider who think that they'd like to see their data registered in the catalogue, so it would be easier to find and discover and use, then please get in contact with me, and then we'll be circling back towards the end of the 6-month period to do some more user engagement, user testing. So if you've been interested in getting involved at that level, also get in contact with me. The email is there, but I'm sure you'll also be able to find me through Ben, and just coming through the property data network as well. And I will stop talking at that point because I think that's my allotted time.
Thank you, Rob. Slick and professional as ever. Well delivered. I just my thoughts watching that back was, we get a lot of questions at Toitū Te Whenua about from externals about digital twins particularly, and are we going to be building something or delivering some platform, and actually just doing the mahi of delivering a single place to find the data to go into those kind of things of authoritative data is actually really powerful in its own right, and good work to do. And I think this is a really good demonstrator of that. There was a question for you in the chat. Awesome. Derek Finn says, awesome to see this work. Is there a plan to include live operational data in CODEM, or is it just for static base data?
I think that's one of the things we very much want to look at in terms of the process development through the next phase of prototyping and how that would work. So obviously having conversations, particularly with NEMA, about their endorsement of the use of the system within the processes and system stewardship that they're involved in, and then obviously the work that Phil is going to talk about next is very, very much looking at that operational response. So I think, to answer your question, yes, Derek, but there's quite a bit of work on digging through roles, responsibilities, and governance to enable that to happen in a sort of best practice way, I'd say.
And that was a good segue to Phil. There's just a comment from Kirsten. Excellent work. Please keep Kāinga Audit involved. We might be interested in sharing our data, but we'll definitely have privacy issues to talk through. That's yeah, thanks Kirsten for your feedback there, and definitely keen to resolve any privacy issues. Oh, there's a follow-up from Bryn just quickly before we go over to Phil. Does the development of this platform mean that we can grab the links and lay it into our own GIS map system?
Yes, that's the intent. Absolutely.
Terrific.
So yeah, it's not about us hosting the data or rehosting the data. It's about providing those links, and even if even if the data isn't live and available through web services, at least to know that data exists within an organization and who you can approach to get hold of it. But ideally, we'd all be using web services.
Cool. And cool, we'll just close off questions there and hand over to Phil. As I mentioned earlier, Phil is the Geospatial Products and Analytics Manager at Fire and Emergency New Zealand, and he's going to be talking about their Common Operations Portal, which is one of those COPs that Rob showed our data, the CODEM data feeding into. So a nice dovetail there to see a practical application already coming through the surface. So Phil, over to you.
Kia ora. Thanks, Ben. So I guess it's probably worth talking a little bit about the genesis of the project that we're working on at the moment. So the project that we're building currently is the Common Operating Platform, which is, I guess, a hub page for a series of applications that all kind of have very specific focused purposes within the realm of emergency management, response work in particular. So during Gabrielle, we had, a number of things going on, and we needed to develop basically a platform or a common operating picture that consolidated a lot of our data sources together and displayed them within a single unified application. And so a geospatial solution, map-centric type solution, was a very obvious choice. And so we developed what was at the time, it was just the known as the Cyclone Gabrielle application, and that sort of brought in a lot of our incident data in particular, so that people could see where our vehicles were responding and where calls were going to. And then on top of that, we just started to add in a whole bunch of other layers as well. And so, sort of following on from that, we sort of looked back at what we'd learned from that experience and sort of came to the conclusion that a few things, had gone really well and a few things that could go better in the future. One of those things that we identified at the time, probably the key thing, is that developing these solutions during an event isn't necessarily a great outcome, and that we don't want to be doing this every time a new event comes around, because you spend so much time in this sort of development phase where you're developing something that by the time you've kind of got something stood up and available for users, you're already a long way through the event, and you've sort of lost a lot of that initial value of the application. So the natural conclusion here was to make sure that we've got something that stood up in the future, and then we started working through what something would look like, what would that something be and how would it be most effective. And so, looking at it from the technical side, we started thinking about some of the initial concerns that we had. Some of that was around privacy of data. How do we make it so that we can create a tool that's broadly useful for a wide audience, but is still protecting people's private data? And what sort of technology do we use for it? What sort of layers are important to people? How do we consolidate all that information in a way that doesn't become messy? Because, if you can start chucking a lot of dots on maps and lines on maps, and eventually you create something that's hard to use and not very useful. So we started going through a bit of a design phase, and I'll take you through this design first, and then I'll show you kind of where we're at now. And so, let's see if this works. So basically the idea was that we would develop a hub page, which is similar to the hub page that the CODEM has been developed on, using Esri technology, and that hub page would host some useful information, like a sort of ticker tape with live sort of updates and potentially some dashboard elements and maps or something on there. But critically, it would host these 4 applications here. This one here is situational awareness. This one here is around people and property. This one here is around infrastructure, and this one here is around imagery. So that would basically break up, and provide some audience segmentation, and would break up the data sets across 4 applications rather than just across one, and kind of dumping everything into one big area, and where you'd create a lot of noise, really. So the idea is that for, say, situational awareness, this will be quite a detailed view of what's going on, where we've got our incident data, our wide area assessments. And so wide area assessments are basically people out in the field with field devices capturing information like the status of a bridge, or the condition of a building or a structure, or the condition of a road, so that you're providing that sort of situational awareness on the ground as to what the conditions are like. That information in turn can actually be fed into some analysis, so help us to identify isolated communities and things like that by identifying roads that are out, or bridges that are damaged. And then our RDAs, or rapid disaster assessments, which is basically, those are captured by USAR. They go to buildings, they examine the safety of those buildings, and then sort of give it a score as to whether or not it's safe to enter, or damaged beyond repair. Then we've got the incident data we've had in the past 24 hours, which is useful for looking back, a bit of analytical information there as to what the situation is on the ground, or has been in that area for a while. Obviously some weather information as well. Working with the police, last time we used missing persons data to look at, to help user and other response teams coordinate where they should focus their search efforts. So where you had concentrated areas of missing persons being reported that implied a lack of connectivity or a lack of ability to talk to people. It also fed into some modelling that we did around inaccessible areas or isolated communities. So we could feed some of that information back into our road networks and run the road network, and it would find isolated areas where the roads are closed. And then when we had that in conjunction with high amounts of missing people, it really implied a very isolated community, and that was allowed us to start coordinating and working on planning for how we get in there and start to assess the situation in those areas. Rapid building assessments, which is the RBAs, which the councils produce in conjunction with MBIE. And so we're working with MBIE and pulling in their data to make that available, and then population estimates. And this is going to, in turn, having information in there like the population estimates and the number of address points that are in within a suburb, that'll help us sort of start to build up some analytics around the extent of the damage. So the more disaster assessments that we've got in an area, and the more the higher the population and things, we can actually start to assess what the impact is at a community level. And then we've got our usual, a number of layers, and these are only indicative. This is just for the purposes of the design. There are different layers and additional layers. Next one is people and property, and this is kind of probably more of a summarized view, and it's focused more on things like who we're dealing with in those areas rather than what we're dealing with. And so it's looking at things like ethnicities, languages, the age groups that are in those areas, and so helping us understand the types of people that we're dealing with. It also includes things like the incident information in there as well, just so we can see what incidents are happening in those things at a glance without having to do too much back and forth between applications. The next one is infrastructure, and so we've been working with some of the telcos, One New Zealand and 2 Degrees so far, have both expressed an interest in helping us out with this project and providing their cell phone coverage and their cell towers, so that we can get a better view of what sort of communication availability there are within certain areas. It'll also contain the road network data set that we maintain here, which will include road closures and information about the condition of the road. And then the last one is the imagery one, and so we had probably the most use in our last COP was around imagery, and that was hosting a number of imagery sources from New Zealand Defence, GNS, imagery that we were capturing as well on the ground using handheld devices, then satellite imagery and drone imagery. So they all kind of will go into here, and that'll become a much more sort of focused area for imagery. Probably road closures is an application that we're going to develop for primarily intended for smaller councils or other organisations who might not have necessarily good ways of tracking the status of the roads. And so it's a simple application that will allow people to select up road segments, identify the condition of them, and that'll feed back into our system. It's an idea. We'll see how it goes. We'll develop the application and see what the appetite is for it afterwards. And this here talks actually about probably one of the most important aspects of the future common operating platform, and that is around the security of data and the privacy aspect of things. So obviously when we're getting in a lot of calls through our incident data, 111 calls and things like that, there's a lot of personal information being exposed. So if you get a call from a property and it's a medical event, that's someone, and who's in a having a bad time, and exposing their address is probably not something that we really want to do. And it's similar with some of the assessments that we're capturing around the conditions of properties and the conditions of buildings. It's not necessarily information where we want to provide the exact location for it. So we thought a bit about how do we obscure that information while still providing, that critical information to organisations that are responding to this. at the ground level. So the idea is in the end is that we want to aggregate this information to the suburb level. So within each suburb, you'll be able to see there's a count, X amount of incidents going on within a suburb, what type of incidents they are, what RDAs are being captured, what wide area assessment information is being captured, without necessarily exposing that. And this is primarily focused for the people and property one. Where the situational awareness one, we're sort of going to see how we go as to whether or not we use the situational awareness one and limit the audience just to certain audiences and expose that one-to-one address information, or whether or not we aggregate that data in that one as well. But this here, this process sort of describes that process of aggregation, and it's very important for the missing persons data, obviously, as well, that we aggregate that to something. So the idea at the moment is that we do that to the suburb level. So what I'll do now is I'll jump over to where we've sort of gotten to with this, and I'll show you the situational awareness application. It's the first one we've developed. I'm hoping to have the other two, property, people and property, and the imagery one are basically both in development at the moment as well. And then the infrastructure one will follow shortly after. We don't have a lot of the infrastructure data at the moment coming in from those third parties, so it's lower down the priority list. But I can show you the situational awareness one in its current form. So the idea here is you'll be presented with a reasonably familiar sort of dashboard view of the world, a little intro screen, and you'll sort of click anywhere and that'll bring you in. And then as we kind of zoom in and out, these dashboard elements here will change to reflect the information on the ground. Over here, the data that we've got loaded in at the moment is all from Cyclone Gabrielle. So we've got our RDA information, our wide area assessment information, the placarding information from MBIE, and then our incident data as well. You can see at the moment the incident data is blank because there's no incidents happening in Napier. But if I zoom out to that sort of country level, currently you can see the incident sitting on the map, and then that one there will come to life as well. If we zoom in to the suburb level, and this is I guess a demonstration of the aggregation. So if I was to click on a suburb here, it's a little bit slow at the moment. Well, it's in development. We're hoping it's a little bit faster when we release it. It'll pull up the suburb information. You can see here that it's showing in this case, we've got the population that's been aggregated in there. We've got the number of address points that are in there. Then we've got some ethnicity information and median age information that's been aggregated into that polygon as well. And behind the scenes, it's actually aggregating all of this information as well. So rather than it coming from the points themselves, all of that information around the level of damage, the structure damage, the incidents over the past 24 hours, the placarding status, and both these wide area assessments data sets are just coming from these polygons rather than the point data sets themselves. In the point data sets, if we look at some of these points here, these are coming from the RDA, and so this is the sort of information that they're capturing during an assessment of a property, and it's quite rich. You can see a whole lot of information in here related to the condition of the building, whether or not it's habitable, whether there's hazardous materials there. They capture quite a lot, and quite often, if I'll see if I can find a better example, they'll also capture imagery, which will be associated with that point. Should be a photo with this one. Yeah, there we got a few photos, which will show the damage. And so, really, really useful information for people that are going in there afterwards and taking a look at what's going on. So it's pretty much where we're at. Oh, you can also see over the side here, we've built this information panel, and again, all of that's being driven off those suburbs and the aggregation that's in there. So all of this is coming through, and this is our fire weather data, which we is provided to us through NIWA, and we've actually got layers dedicated to that as well. So here's some of the layers that are in here. Let's see if I turn some of these off, turn those off, turn those off, turn those off. In our assessment layers, those are the RDAs, the wide area assessment, and the placarding data. So if I turn off the rapid disaster assessment, the little circular ones that we're seeing are the wide area assessments. So that's more the conditional, the qualitative assessments of roads or other things. And similar to our RDA, it captures photos in a lot of cases of whatever it is that they're looking at. Here we've got a field. Let's see if I can find something a bit more interesting. Oftentimes it'll be things like bridges. So it's a washed out bridge or river. Yeah, washed out bridge. And turn those off. We've also got our administration layers, and so that is the suburbs, TAs, regional boundaries, and then our weather information. So the weather information, if I turn that on, this is mostly live. So there's a bit of a lag on some of it, but it just shows things like the weather, and you get your legend will show you. Hopefully, it's not doing very well. It shows this, what weather's like at the moment. Same with rainfall. And so, yeah, that's pretty much where we're at the moment. The idea is that by the end of December, we will have the people and property one done as well. We'll fix up any bugs that exist in these existing ones, and we should have the imagery one starting to come together as well. And all going to plan, the fundamentals of the hub page that bring it all together. So I think that's about me.
Thank you, Phil. A powerful tool you've in the progress of building there, and looking forward to see more of that come together. We've got just under 15 minutes now just for Q&A discussion. There were a couple of questions in the chat that I'll go back to first, but anyone feel free to pop a hand up on the Teams portal there, and we'll throw the mic to you, or you can keep popping questions in the chat and it'll just be my voice reading them out, which has mixed benefits.
I was just going to say one more thing, Ben.
Sure.
Is probably worth pointing out too, is that a lot of the layers that we create and the information that we've created for this, we're going to make available as REST feeds as well. So they won't just be trapped behind this this tool that we've developed here. If other people want those layers to integrate into their own GIS systems, they should be able to pull that over as well.
Terrific, thank you. Firstly, I'll just go back to, in terms of the questions, there were just a couple of questions that popped into the chat that Rob did answer in the chat, but I'll just read them through for anyone visually impaired. So will the CODEM have publicly searchable metadata for restricted secured layers, along with instructions on how to get the appropriate access? And Rob's answer was, we will be making metadata available with the focus on working with data providers to have at least a minimum of key data published, which would include how to access it and who can access it. And then there was a quick question there. Sometimes it's hard to locate data sets from councils. Yeah, we have heard that loud and clear. How would this have worked, say, with the Hawke's Bay event earlier in the year? And Rob's answer, I'd say the cyclone response exposed yet again the need for this type of solution. So having something like CODEM would have taken some of the pain and time out of the efforts of the intel analysis, and people in those roles would have had more confidence and less stress. Yeah, that's got 100% from somebody. Resounding agreement. Cool. Now, questions more recently. Will any, so Derek Finn has asked he says useful data feeds for CDEM there, like NIWA weather data, and asks, will any of these be shared with CDEM groups?
So if the CDEMs are part of the group which is hosting the common operating platform, then they should be able to pull in those layers directly themselves into there. It won't be all layers, but it will be a good chunk of them. So, and probably the fire weather one will probably be in that list, I'd say.
Yep. Cool. Bryn once again has popped up. Hi Bryn, you've asked, will there be a follow-up workshop once it goes live? And I'd say yes, either through us or through GEMA or another network or all of the above. There will be updates and demos as this goes live and continues in development. Definitely keen to get this out there. And Derek has just made a comment. Oh, answered. You've answered a question he had earlier. Cool. And that's all in the chat for now. Any other questions? Feel free to pop a hand up or just turn your mic on if there's not a queue.
Sorry, Derek here. I was just going to ask, Phil, what kind of timeframes are we looking at for the project?
So by the end of the year, we should have a good chunk of it stood up internally. And then in the new year, we'll probably do a bit of tidy up and just get it kind of more ready and polished for, mass consumption. It'll probably then go out for testing with some of the key groups that we've been working with. And then after that, there'll probably be a more widespread release, or at least some sort of certainly in between that, a get together to kind of demonstrate the solution to people, and then following that there'll be more of an official release. So we're hoping I would say within the first quarter of next year would be the aim.
Cool, thank you.
Oh, kia ora koutou. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I've got internet issues today, and have IT logged into my computer trying to fix it. So it's been quite hard watching this on my phone. I'm at TPK. I'm a principal advisor in the Whenua Māori service in Toitū and Tamaki Makaurau, and obviously, we've been working quite hard to support our Ikaroa Rāwhiti team with the cyclone recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So we use our GIS mapping more so around supports to whenua Māori blocks, the governed and ungoverned things, and how we can support an approach to make sure some of those whānau are considered in recovery. So I guess my question was, when this does roll out, depending on the event, would, if it's regionally based as opposed to a national based event, would these things trigger the use of their CODEM data sets, like i.e. just the Auckland floods, or just drought down in Southland or something like that? Are those sort of the considerations for using these tools?
Yeah, certainly from the CODEM perspective, there's obviously a lot of standing data and information needs that are there that we can sort of pre-populate in advance of events, and then we'd be looking at the process for pulling in event specific stuff, likely at a regional level, and working with processes for doing that. So in answer to your question, yes, we'd want to include that event specific stuff and to make that available. I think one of the things we found when we did a lot of the user analysis at the start of this was that a lot of the thinking had been how do solutions service the civil defence sector, and how does that then work within local and national government agencies? But that excluded a lot of users who were outside of that cohort of users. So certainly with the CODEM project, the idea is to make as much of the available data as available to as many people, so that they can get on and do what they want to do with it. And to do that both inside and outside of periods of a response.
Similar for the common operating platform as well. We kind of view it as sort of reasonably region agnostic, in that if an event triggers off, then because the solution will be available 24/7, always on type application, as units start responding to it, and as that information starts feeding into the that suburb aggregation layer, then that'll just be happening live in our system. And if our USAR teams get activated to respond to that, then they'll be feeding in the the rapid disaster assessment information and other layers, which will be aggregated into those suburbs as well. So as to whether or not all information will be being updated will depend on the scale of the event, but generally, our incident data will always be feeding into it.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks, Bren, for the question, and good luck with the IT issues there. Feel your pain. We've all been there. A question for Phil from Derek. Any thoughts on symbology standards for the platform? GEMA, perhaps?
So currently for the RDAs and the RBA information and the WAA, we haven't come up with anything too much in that front at the moment. They're just, because what they tend to be is they tend to be conditional. So it's like whether or not it's and it's as sort of traffic light driven symbology. So if it's good, it's green. If it's bad, it's red. And there might be a yellow and orange in between. And we just, the only thing we're really looking for there is a distinction between them. As for our incident data, there's a attribution, there's a sort of a symbology set that's been around for a while that's already been utilized within the application. That's due to actually be updated within the next month or two with new symbology. I didn't show you in here earlier, but we do have one of the data sets that we've got in here as a sort of our points of interest. So that's things like community centres, things like stadiums and community halls, and there's a whole bunch of other points at schools and hospitals, medical centres. All of those, they're just being symbolised with sort of reasonably standard. Actually, I can probably quickly show you if I find my mouse. Fairly standard symbology. So we've got this points of interest layer. If I zoom in somewhere. But I would say none of it's sort of, hard and fast, fixed in stone at the moment. They're very much just kind of very functional, out of the box symbology. I don't know if you guys can see that very well. But, I guess we'd be open to looking at other symbology sets, if they were required. The trickier ones, like I said, is kind of just more around those conditional statement symbology sets, like the RBAs and the RDAs and the WAAs, where it's really just, it's traffic light driven symbology, really. Have you got any other thoughts on that, Derek, yourself?
Just that, yeah, the GEMA community's obviously put a lot of time sort of coming up with some standards, trying to reach that impossible goal of standards across the country for symbology. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of the traffic light system for those rapid assessments, etc. That's pretty much standard, but there might be potential there in terms of like your points of interest for having a look at all the stuff that GEMA's there and hosting. Because there's been a lot of basically workshops and people communicating on it and debating it and back and forth and getting quite heated about their precious symbols. So it'd be great
I
to
can feel your pain on that one. We've just gone through the exercise of updating our incident icons, and it's been quite a challenge. You know, everyone's quite emotional about icons, as it turns out. So
yeah.
Yep.
Perhaps the most heated debates we have in GEMA is what should the logo look like. So yeah. But yeah, you know, there's been a lot of work done in that space. So I think it's definitely worthwhile.
I'm happy to look at them. Happy to look at them. Yeah, for sure. Cool.
There's a suggestion from Kirsten in the chat, and need to symbolize personed versus non-personed police stations.
If we can get our hands on that information, we'd probably happily do that. Yep.
Yeah, and a question from Matt: will this track all existing infrastructure, i.e., rail, telecoms, electricity, water, roads, etc.?
That's the hope. You know, so once you start working with the private sector on some of this stuff, it becomes a little bit complex. Some of them are willing to share information. Some of them, you know, less keen and got, you know, concerns about their competitors seeing their data in the same place as their competitors' data, and so you know, there's some conversations to be had there, I guess, with them. For some of the other ones, there is, you know, I guess, what have we got? Rail, telecoms, electricity. So the water we've already got. So we've got a lot of those water networks. We've got a lot of processes on our side to gather that information from the councils and put it in. Obviously, we have a big interest in hydrants. So we capture all of that information already, and that's actually loaded into our people and property and infrastructure layers. And then things like airports and stuff, we'll work with relevant agencies to try and get better data of where we don't have it. One of the benefits of FENZ is that because we have to respond to a lot of calls at large facilities, we actually have really good information on a lot of those locations, because say we go to an airport, we don't want to know just that it's at the airport. If there's an incident there, we want to know what building at the airport it is. And so we have really good points of interest data for airports and for, you know, railway stations and schools and things. So in a lot of cases, our preference is probably going to be actually to use our own common place name data sets, because it's far richer than just a standard points of interest data set, because it does actually identify specific buildings rather than just one polygon or one point to describe that facility.
And I guess I just add to that, you know, the changes in the Civil Defence Emergency Management Bill. There's a requirement there for operators of critical infrastructure to share information, so inside and outside of response. So that requirement will hopefully come through into the legislation. So there's an incentivization there for utility operators to find ways to share that information effectively, and the solutions we're, you know, outlined here today could be part of the solution for them in doing that. There's also a question in there saying, are we generating a nationwide 3D water layers, etc.? Certainly from our perspective, from the CODEM stuff, we're not looking to generate new data sets. We're just trying to provide access to what's already there. I think that's certainly beyond scope for what we're up to at the moment.
Cool. And yeah, just conscious of time, we're just ticked over the hour. Phil, just about that police stations, Kirsten did comment back. We have already got it. So it looks like a conversation with Kainga Order might get you that that data.
Yeah,
and they were keen to plug into the portal as well. So yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. Problems getting solved in real time. So yeah, I'll just move to close the webinar there for today. Thank you everyone for your time over lunch. Stomachs are rumbling, I'm sure. And thank you to Rob and Phil especially for presenting today. And this is the last webinar for the year from the Data Network. So thank you to anyone else that's on the call that's presented through the year. We really appreciate your always being keen to share. I've not had anyone say no when I've approached them yet, which can be a scary thing to to do. And so thank you all again. And we have recorded this session today, and we'll be making it available as soon as the transcriptions are tidied up, which can be a labour of love. And yeah, so with that, I will just do our closing karakia and then send you away to your days. So, kui e te kaupapa, ka rea ngā hua, ka rere ngā arawai, kua mau te maturanga, hei arahina ngā mahi o Toitū te whenua, kia tau te rangimarie, ki runga i a tātou katoa. Homie, huie, tai, kie. Our work has come to a satisfactory conclusion. The fruit is growing. The waterways continue to flow. We now have the knowledge to lead and drive the work of Toitū te whenua. May peace settle upon all of us. Gather and go forward together. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks all.